Does your kind even know what a Stradivarius is? Richard Whitmore didn't bother lowering his voice. 200 guests turned to look. A 10-year-old black boy stood near the ballroom entrance, frozen. "Sir, please." The woman in the cleaning uniform rushed forward. "He's my son. We didn't mean to—" "Didn't mean to what? Contaminate a charity gala?" Richard swirled his champagne. "Look at him. Goodwill clothes, public school education. You think he belongs near a $2 million violin?" He poured the champagne onto the marble floor. "Clean it up. That's what you people do, isn't it?" The boy's mother knelt immediately, pulling napkins from her apron. The child stood still, eyes locked on the instrument under the spotlight. Richard turned back to his guests, already forgetting them. 3 hours later, that same man would be on his knees, discovering the child he just humiliated was his own son. Have you ever been judged for something you couldn't control, and then watched karma arrive in person? 5:47 in the morning. St. Augustine Memorial Hospital smelled like disinfectant and burnt coffee. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, casting everything in that particular shade of institutional green that made healthy people look sick. Angela Carter pushed her cleaning cart down the third-floor hallway. The wheels squeaked. One of them always pulled left. Had been doing it for 3 years now, but maintenance never got around to fixing it. She didn't mind. Her navy uniform hung loose on her frame, 2 sizes too big, bought from the Goodwill on Mercy Street for $6. The sleeves were rolled up 3 times. Her sneakers, white once upon a time, now showed more tape than leather, where the soles had started separating. Angela moved through the oncology wing like a ghost, quiet, efficient. She'd learned early that invisible people caused less trouble. Room 307. Room 308. Room 309. She paused outside 310. Through the small window in the door, she could see the bed, the IV stand, the oxygen machine with its rhythmic hiss and click. Her reflection stared back at her from the glass. 32 years old, but her eyes looked 50. Dark circles that no amount of concealer could hide. Hair pulled back in a tight bun because she couldn't afford a proper haircut. Angela moved on. At the nurses' station, 2 women in scrubs hunched over their computers. They didn't look up when she passed. They never did. She emptied the trash bins, mopped the floors, wiped down the counters with the industrial cleaner that left her hands cracked and raw despite the gloves. Somewhere down the hall, a patient coughed. The sound echoed off the walls. Angela hummed while she worked, so quietly that even she barely heard it. A Bach partita. The notes came automatically, muscle memory from another life. Her phone buzzed in her pocket. A text from Mrs. Carter next door. Elijah ate breakfast. Left for school at 7:15. Violin tucked under his arm like always. Angela smiled, typed back, "Thank you. I owe you. You owe me nothing, honey. That boy is a blessing to watch." The phone went back in her pocket. Angela returned to mopping. The morning sun started filtering through the windows at the end of the hall, golden light on linoleum. Another day. She had 4 more floors to finish before her shift ended at 2. 11 years ago, Angela had been a nursing student. 2nd year at Boston College. Scholarship student, yes, but she'd been there. She'd belonged, smart, determined, going to change the world. Then she'd met a surgical resident named Richard. Brilliant, ambitious, completely unavailable emotionally, but she'd been 21 and stupid and convinced she could fix him. One night, one mistake. He'd left for a research position in Switzerland 3 weeks later. She'd found out she was pregnant 2 weeks after that. Angela had tried to find him, called the hospital, left messages, but Richard Whitmore was already gone, already climbing, already building his empire. She'd made a choice: drop out, have the baby, start over. Elijah was born on a Tuesday in March. 6 pounds, 4 ounces, 10 fingers, 10 toes, eyes that looked exactly like his father's, though she'd never tell him that. The nursing scholarship evaporated. Student loans came due. She'd taken the first job she could find, cleaning offices downtown for $9 an hour. Then Elijah turned 3 and hummed along to a violin concerto on PBS. Perfect pitch. She'd borrowed a quarter-size violin from a music teacher. Elijah had picked it up like he'd been playing his whole life. Angela had worked 3 jobs to pay for lessons, 2 years of group classes at the community center. Then the teacher, Mrs. Kowalski, an elderly Polish woman with kind eyes, had pulled Angela aside. "Your son is special," she'd said. "Truly special. But I cannot teach him anymore. He needs a real conservatory." Conservatory tuition, $12,000 a year. Angela's salary, $28,000. So Elijah learned from YouTube videos, practiced on a school rental violin with a crack down the back, taught himself to read music by watching tutorials on their shared laptop. And he was good, better than good. But better than good didn't pay for auditions, didn't cover application fees, didn't open doors when you lived in a studio apartment in Roxbury and your mother cleaned toilets for a living. Angela's break came at 9:30, 15 minutes in the staff room, stale coffee in a styrofoam cup, a granola bar she'd brought from home because the vending machines were too expensive. She sat in the corner chair, the one with the rip in the cushion. The flyer on the bulletin board caught her eye. Bright white paper. Expensive printing. Sati, Augustine Memorial Hospital, Annual Charity Gala. Saturday, November 18th, 7 o'clock p.m. Grand Ballroom Talent Showcase Competition. First prize, $50,000 plus matching donation to charity of choice. Angela stood up, walked closer. $50,000. She could pay off half her medical debt, put the rest toward Elijah's education, maybe even afford one of those fancy youth conservatory programs that sent students to Juilliard and Curtis. Her hands trembled as she pulled out her phone to take a picture. Then she saw the fine print at the bottom. Entry fee, $500. Ensures intimate, high-quality event. All proceeds benefit hospital cardiac research. $500. Angela's checking account currently held $83.14. Payday was Friday, but that check was already allocated. Rent, utilities, groceries, Elijah's school supplies. She took the picture anyway. That evening, she mentioned it to Mrs. Carter while picking up Elijah. "Could be good for the boy," Mrs. Carter said, watching Elijah practice scales in the living room. "Let people see what he can do." "The entry fee is $500. Mrs. Carter's face fell. "Oh, honey." "It's fine." Angela forced a smile. "We're fine." But that night, after Elijah fell asleep on their pull-out couch, Angela sat at their tiny kitchen table and did the math. If she skipped lunch for the next 3 weeks, that saved $45. If she walked to work instead of taking the bus, another $30. If she picked up the Saturday overnight shift, double time, that was an extra $120. Still not enough. She opened her laptop, searched for emergency loans bad credit. The interest rates made her stomach turn. Angela closed the laptop, stared at the wall. In the other room, Elijah turned in his sleep. His violin case rested against the wall, held together with duct tape. Her phone buzzer. A text from the hospital scheduling system. Emergency coverage needed. Saturday, Nov. 18, 3 p.m., 11 p.m. Double pay. Reply yes to accept. The gala was Saturday night. Angela stared at the message for a long time. Typed, yes. She'd figure something out. She always did. The phone screen went dark. Through the thin walls, she could hear the neighbors arguing. A siren wailed past on the street below. The radiator clanked and hissed. Angela looked at the flyer photo on her phone one more time. $50,000. She deleted the photo. Some dreams weren't meant for people like her. Richard Whitmore arrived at St. Augustine Memorial at 2:15 on Saturday afternoon. The vintage Bentley pulled up to the main entrance. Burgundy paint, chrome details that caught the sunlight. The valet practically sprinted to open the door. Richard stepped out in a charcoal Tom Ford suit that cost more than Angela's annual salary. Silver hair perfectly styled, Swiss watch glinting on his wrist. He didn't say thank you, didn't acknowledge the valet at all. He walked like a man who owned the building, which, in a sense, he did. Whitmore Pharmaceuticals had donated $15 million to St. Augustine over the past 12 years. The cardiac wing bore his name in gold letters. The research lab. The new pediatric center. Richard Whitmore didn't give money out of kindness. He gave it control. 3 people followed him through the automatic doors. His assistant, clipboard in hand. His PR handler, a thin man in designer glasses. A photographer with expensive equipment slung over both shoulders. The hospital administrator met them in the lobby. "Mr. Whitmore, wonderful to see you. The ballroom is nearly ready." "Nearly?" Richard didn't break stride. "I was told 3 o'clock. "Yes, sir, we're just finishing the floral arrangements." "Show me." They walked through the corridors. Richard's shoes clicked against polished floors. Staff members pressed themselves against walls to let him pass. A nurse fumbled her charts. An orderly quickly moved his supply cart. Richard noticed none of them. To him, they were furniture. The grand ballroom occupied the hospital's original building. Vaulted ceilings, crystal chandeliers, marble floors that reflected everything like still water. Tables covered in white linen filled the space. White orchids in tall glass vases. The stage at the far end showcased a Stradivarius violin on a velvet stand borrowed from the New England Conservatory, worth $2 million. Richard walked straight to it, examined it from 3 feet away, hands clasped behind his back. "This is acceptable," he said. His assistant made a note. Richard turned to the champagne glasses on the serving station, picked one up, held it to the light. A single water spot marred the crystal. Unacceptable. He didn't raise his voice. Didn't need to. The catering manager appeared within seconds, face flushed. "Sir, I apologize. We'll replace all—" "You had one job, premium glassware. I'm not paying premium prices for mediocre execution." "Yes, sir, right away." The manager snapped his fingers. His staff scrambled. Richard moved on to inspect the table arrangements, adjusted an orchid that sat 1 inch off center, straightened a name card. His PR handler leaned in. "Sir, the press will arrive at 6:30, Channel 5 confirmed." "I know. I approved the list." "And your speech?" "Excellence recognizes excellence. That's the theme. We're announcing the Whitmore Youth Music Scholarship. $500,000 over 5 years for promising young musicians from disadvantaged backgrounds." He said disadvantaged, the way other people said diseased. "Beautiful, sir. Very generous." "It's not generosity. It's an investment. Find one talented kid, put them through Berkeley. They remember who gave them the opportunity. That's a legacy." "Of course, sir." "These people," Richard gestured vaguely at the staff preparing the room, "they don't understand that. They think success is luck. They think talent appears out of nowhere." He shook his head. "I built a company from nothing. The difference between me and them, I refuse to stay poor." His assistant nodded. She'd heard this speech before. "The world rewards excellence. If you're still mopping floors at 30, whose fault is that? Personal accountability. That's what's missing." A cleaning cart appeared in the doorway. Angela Carter, still in her uniform from the morning shift, began pushing it toward the service hallway. Richard noticed her, looked at his watch. "Service staff shouldn't be visible during setup." The administrator checked her tablet. "Sir, we had a call out. Angela's covering—" "I don't need the explanation. I need her out of sight." Richard turned to Angela directly. "You. Use the back corridors. Guests arrive in 4 hours. I don't want staff in public spaces." Angela stopped. "Yes, sir." "And stay away from the stage area. That violin is worth more than you'll earn in your lifetime. I don't need anyone with—" He glanced at her uniform, her worn shoes, careless hands near it. Angela's jaw tightened, but she nodded. "Understood, sir." She reversed her cart and disappeared through the service entrance. Richard had already forgotten about her. He returned his attention to the ballroom, adjusted another orchid, inspected the stage lighting, found 12 more things that needed correction. By 4 o'clock, the staff had learned to stay out of his way. By 6, Richard stood alone at the center of his perfect ballroom, surveying his domain. Everything exactly as he wanted it. Controlled. Pristine. Excellent. Outside, the sun began to set. Inside, Richard Whitmore smiled. Tonight would be perfect. 7:30. The ballroom glittered under crystal chandeliers. 200 guests in evening wear filled the space. Tuxedos, cocktail dresses, jewelry that caught the light with every movement. A string quartet played Vivaldi near the stage. Waiters circulated with champagne and hors d'oeuvres. Conversations hummed like a well-oiled machine. Richard Whitmore stood at the center holding court. Hospital board members, local politicians, the director of the New England Conservatory gathered around him. "The scholarship will prioritize merit above all else," Richard said. "Raw talent, not participation trophies, just excellence." Polite nods, murmurs of agreement. Angela moved along the back wall with her cleaning cart. Stay invisible, handle spills immediately. Remain in service corridors unless necessary. She kept her head down, tried not to think about the $50,000 being competed for 20 feet away. Elijah sat in the service hallway behind the kitchen, Mrs. Carter had canceled at the last minute. Her daughter went into labor, so Angela had no choice but to bring him. He was supposed to stay hidden, stay quiet, do homework on the folding chair behind the industrial dishwashers. But Elijah was 10 years old, and he could hear the violin. The Stradivarius rested on its stand on stage. Even through walls and doors, Elijah could sense it. He stood up, walked to the service entrance, pressed his face against the small window. The ballroom stretched before him like a different universe. Golden light, beautiful people. And there, on stage, the most perfect violin he'd ever seen. Elijah's hand reached for the door handle. He knew he shouldn't, but his hand turned it anyway. The door opened, he slipped through, stayed close to the wall, hidden behind a tall, floral arrangement. The music wrapped around him. No one noticed. He moved closer to the stage. One step. Another. His eyes never left the violin. Then his backpack caught on a serving cart. A champagne bottle tipped, fell, shattered against the marble floor. The sound cut through the ballroom like a gunshot. Every head turned, every conversation stopped. Elijah stood frozen. A 10-year-old black boy in a faded jacket and worn sneakers, surrounded by shattered glass and spreading champagne. Richard saw him first. "What is this?" His voice carried across the ballroom. Not loud, but sharp enough to make people flinch. He walked toward Elijah. The crowd parted. Richard stopped 5 feet away, looked down at the child, then at the broken glass. "You people really think you can just wander in here, don't you?" Elijah's mouth opened, closed. No sound came out. "This is a $2,000 per plate event. Not a daycare for, well, for whatever this is." A few guests shifted uncomfortably. Most watched with detached curiosity. Angela burst through the service entrance. Her face drained when she saw Elijah. "I'm sorry, sir." She rushed forward, grabbing Elijah's arm. "He's my son. We'll leave right—" "You'll leave when I say you can leave." Richard plucked a champagne flute from a passing waiter, held it up, then poured it onto the floor. The liquid spread across the marble. "Since you're here anyway, clean that up." Angela's hands trembled. "Yes, sir." She knelt immediately, pulled napkins from her apron, began sopping up the liquid. Elijah didn't move. He stared at Richard with wide eyes. "Does your kind even know what a Stradivarius is?" Richard gestured toward the stage. "That instrument is worth $2 million, more than your mother will earn in her entire life." "I know what it is." Elijah's voice came out small but clear. The ballroom went quieter. Richard's eyebrows rose. "Excuse me?" "It's a Stradivarius, from Italy, the 1600s. Elijah swallowed hard. "I play violin." Someone in the crowd laughed. Then another. The laughter spread. "You play violin, eh?" Richard's smile didn't reach his eyes. "How delightful. Where did you learn? YouTube?" Elijah's face burned. "Yes, sir." More laughter. A man in a tuxedo called out, "The kid probably thinks it's a toy." A woman in pearls whispered loudly, "Poor thing. Doesn't even realize how embarrassing this is." Richard raised his hand. The laughter died. "Well then, if you're truly a violinist, prove it. Play something. Right now." Angela stood quickly. "Sir, please. He's just a child." "Just a child who claims to play violin." Richard gestured to the stage. "One piece, complete, no mistakes." "Mr. Whitmore." The hospital administrator tried to intervene. Richard ignored her. His eyes stayed on Elijah. "Here's my offer. If you can actually play, really play, I'll donate $20,000 to the prize fund. In your name." He paused. "But when you fail, you apologize to everyone here for wasting their time. And your mother resigns. Tonight." Angela's face went white. "No, we're leaving. Mama." Elijah's small hand gripped hers. "I can do it. Baby, no, I can." 200 people watched, waited. Phone cameras appeared. Richard smiled. "Well, boy, do you dare?" Elijah's heart hammered against his ribs. 200 faces stared at him. Some are curious, some were amused, most indifferent. His mother's hand squeezed his shoulder. "Baby, we don't have to do this. Let's just go." But if they left, she'd lose her job anyway. Richard Whitmore would make sure of it. And they needed this job, needed the health insurance, needed every dollar. Elijah looked at his mother's face, saw the fear there, the exhaustion, the weight of 10 years carrying everything alone. He thought about this morning. Her leaving for work before dawn. The alarm at 4:30, same time every day for as long as he could remember. He thought about the nights she came home with cracked, bleeding hands from industrial cleaners, how she never complained, never said it wasn't fair. He thought about last Tuesday when he'd asked for pizza, just once. The way her face fell before she smiled and said, "Maybe next month, baby." Elijah looked past Richard, past the crowd, at the violin on stage. He'd never touched an instrument like that, never been close to one. His school rental had a crack down the back and strings that went out of tune every other day. But he knew what music felt like. He knew what it meant to take broken things and make them sing. His mother knelt beside him, whispered in his ear, "You don't owe these people anything. We can walk away. But then you lose your job. I'll find another one." "Mama." Elijah looked at her, really looked, saw the gray hairs she tried to hide, the lines around her eyes, the way her uniform hung loose because she'd lost weight skipping meals. "You told me never to let anyone make me small." Angela's eyes filled with tears. "You told me if I know I can do something, I should do it, even if I'm scared. I also told you not to let people use you for sport. I'm not doing this for him." Elijah glanced at Richard, then back. "I'm doing it for you." Angela pressed her forehead against his. "You don't have to save me." "You've been saving me my whole life." He stood straight, wiped his eyes with the back of his hand, turned to face Richard. I'll play. Richard's smile widened. Wonderful. Just so we're clear. $20,000 if I finish without mistakes. If I fail, I apologize and Mama loses her job. Precisely. Okay. Elijah started toward the stage. Angela reached for him. Elijah? It's okay, Mama. He didn't look back. Couldn't. If he did, he'd lose his nerve. His sneakers squeaked against marble. The crowd parted. Phones lifted. Elijah climbed the 3 steps to the stage. The Stradivarius waited under the spotlight. Behind him, near the service entrance, his mother stood with her hands pressed to her mouth. Elijah reached for the violin. The violin felt impossibly light in Elijah's hands. He'd seen Stradivarius instruments in YouTube videos, read about them in library books. But holding one was different. The wood was warm, alive, like it had been waiting for him. He lifted it to his shoulder, adjusted his chin rest. His hands trembled so badly he almost dropped the bow. Richard leaned against a table near the stage, champagne in hand. Take your time, boy. We have all night. Laughter rippled through the crowd. Elijah closed his eyes, took a breath. Think about Mama. Think about why you're here. His fingers found the strings, pressed down. The muscle memory was there, built from thousands of hours on his cracked school violin. He decided on Bach, Chaconne in D minor, one of the hardest pieces ever written for solo violin. 15 minutes of technical precision and emotional depth that had broken professional musicians. Mrs. Kowalski had told him once, if you can play Chaconne, you can play anything. He'd learned it from a recording on YouTube. A performance by Hilary Hahn that he'd watched 273 times, practiced it in sections, measure by measure, because his school violin couldn't hold tune long enough to play it through. But this violin could. This violin could do anything. Elijah drew the bow across the strings. The first note came out shaky, thin. His bow hand cramped from nerves and the weight of 200 stairs. Someone near the bar snickered. A woman whispered, "This is painful." Richard checked his watch, made a show of it. This should be brief. More laughter. But Elijah didn't stop. He played the second note, then the third, then the fourth, and something shifted. His breathing steadied, his shoulders dropped. The ballroom fell away, the chandeliers, the marble, the people in their expensive clothes. There was only the music. The opening phrases of Chaconne emerged like a voice speaking from centuries ago, mournful, searching, each note a question without an answer. Bach had written this piece after his wife died. Elijah had read that on Wikipedia. The composer pouring his grief into music because words weren't enough. Elijah understood that. He had his own grief, his own questions. Why did his mother have to work herself to exhaustion? Why couldn't they afford the things other kids had? Why did people like Richard Whitmore get to decide who mattered and who didn't? The music poured out. His fingers moved across the fingerboard. His left hand found positions he'd practiced in his tiny apartment, trying to stay quiet so the neighbors wouldn't bang on the walls. But this wasn't quiet. This was everything he'd held inside for 10 years. 30 seconds in, the snickering stopped. A woman near the front set down her champagne glass, leaned forward slightly. 45 seconds in, conversations began to die mid-sentence. The man who'd called the violin a toy stood with his mouth slightly open. 1 minute in, the entire ballroom was listening. Richard straightened from his casual lean, his eyes narrowed. This wasn't what he'd expected. Elijah's bow danced across the strings, the chaconne built in complexity, running passages that required absolute precision, double stops where he played 2 strings simultaneously, creating harmonies that shouldn't be possible from one instrument. But Elijah made them possible. His fingers flew. His bow arm controlled dynamics from whisper soft to thunderous and back again in the space of 4 measures. He shaped each phrase like a sentence, each section like a paragraph in a story only music could tell. 2 minutes in, Dr. Patricia Carter covered her mouth with her hand. Tears gathered in her eyes. She'd been in the room when Richard humiliated this child. She'd almost intervened. Almost. Now she stood witnessing something she couldn't explain, couldn't rationalize. The hospital administrator stared, frozen with a canapé halfway to her lips. 2.5 minutes in, a man in the back, Dr. Harold Finch from Boston Conservatory, grabbed his wife's arm. "That's not possible," he whispered. "What?" "That technique, that phrasing. He's playing like he's studied with masters for 15 years. He's 10 years old. I know." 3 minutes in, the entire ballroom held its breath. Phones recorded, but the people holding them had forgotten they were recording. They were just watching, listening, witnessing something that defied logic. A child in Goodwill clothes playing like he'd been touched by something divine. The music swelled. Elijah leaned into the difficult passages, attacking them with confidence that seemed to come from nowhere, from everywhere. 4 minutes in, even the waiters had stopped serving. They stood along the walls, trays forgotten, listening to a 10-year-old boy prove that talent didn't care about money or race or circumstance. Talent just was. Angela stood by the service entrance, tears streaming down her face. She'd heard Elijah practice, heard played in their apartment, in Mrs. Carter's living room, in the elementary school auditorium during the winter concert where he performed Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star with 20 other beginners. But she'd never heard him play like this, because he'd never had an instrument that could match what was inside him. Until now. The Stradivarius was giving him wings. 5 minutes in, Richard's champagne glass hung forgotten in his hand. His face had lost its smirk, lost its certainty, lost its cruelty. He watched Elijah with an expression somewhere between confusion and recognition. Something about the boy's profile under the spotlight, the intensity of his concentration, the way his whole body moved with the music, like he and the violin were one organism. Something about it tugged at Richard's chest, a feeling he couldn't place, didn't want to place. He pushed it away, focused on the performance, but the feeling persisted. 6 minutes in, Elijah reached the most technically difficult passage, a series of rapid 16th notes cascading up and down the fingerboard like water over stones. Most professional violinists stumbled here. The passage required not just speed, but clarity. Every note had to ring. The room tensed. This was where the child would fail. This was where reality would reassert itself. Elijah's fingers blurred across the strings. Every note is crystal clear, perfect intonation, perfect rhythm, perfect clarity. Impossible, but happening. A collective exhale rippled through the crowd. Dr. Finch grabbed his wife's hand, squeezed hard. I've seen concert violinists butcher that passage. 7 minutes in, the piece began its emotional ascent. The mournful opening theme returned but transformed, no longer a question. Now, a statement, a declaration, a refusal to accept despair as the final word. Elijah's eyes were closed. Sweat beaded on his forehead. His small body swayed with the music, rocking slightly like he was being moved by currents only he could feel. He wasn't in the ballroom anymore. He was somewhere else entirely. Somewhere music lived independent of rooms and people and judgment. A place where truth was the only currency that mattered. 8 minutes in, the ballroom became a cathedral. The music filled every corner, resonated off marble floors and vaulted ceilings. The acoustics of the old hotel ballroom had been designed for this, for sound to bloom and breathe and live. The Stradivarius sang in Elijah's hands like it had been silent for years and finally found its voice. A woman in the front row wiped tears with her napkin, no longer caring that her mascara ran. A board member who'd been skeptical of the whole evening stood with his arms crossed, but his jaw trembled and his eyes were wet. Even the security guard by the door had tears on his face. 9 minutes in, Richard's hand moved to his chest. His heart was pounding. Why was his heart pounding? This was just a child, just a performance, just music. But it wasn't just anything. It was everything. He looked at the boy on stage, really looked. The angle of his jaw, strong, defined, the shape of his eyes, deep set, intense. The way he held himself when he played, like the music was the only thing in the universe that mattered. Richard knew that posture, had seen it before, in a mirror, 30 years ago, when he used to care about things beyond money and power. His breath caught. No, impossible. But the math, the timing, Angela Carter. She'd been a nursing student. They'd had one night. She'd tried to contact him and he'd... Oh, God. 10 minutes in, Elijah opened his eyes slightly, saw the crowd's faces, saw them watching, not with mockery, not with amusement, not with pity, with reverence. He had them. And instead of playing it safe, instead of just finishing cleanly and taking his $20,000, Elijah made a choice. He gave them everything. Everything he had. Everything he was. Everything he'd ever be. The final section exploded. Elijah's bow attacked the strings with controlled ferocity. The music soared upward, reaching for something beyond the ceiling, beyond the building, beyond Boston, beyond Earth itself. Every technical skill he'd taught himself from YouTube videos, every hour of practice in secret so he wouldn't bother anyone, every moment of doubt when he wondered if he was good enough, if he'd ever be good enough, if people like him were allowed to be good enough. It all poured into these final minutes. His fingers bled. He didn't notice. His bow arm screamed with fatigue. He didn't care. There was only music. Only the truth of it. The unstoppable force of it. 11 minutes in, a woman sobbed openly. A man stared at the ceiling, overwhelmed. Dr. Carter had given up trying to hide her tears. 12 minutes in, the piece began its descent. The wild energy softened. The theme returned one final time, but peaceful now. Resolved. Accepted. Like a question finally answered after years of asking. Elijah played the last phrase with his eyes closed. Each note is perfectly placed. Each moment is given its full weight. No rushing, no hesitation, just truth. The final chord rang out. He held it. Let it sustain. Let the Stradivarius sing until the sound faded naturally into silence, the vibrations dying in the air like the last light of sunset. Then Elijah lowered the violin, lowered the bow, opened his eyes. For 3 full seconds, no one moved, no one breathed. The silence felt sacred, untouchable. Then someone in the back started clapping. Just one person. Dr. Finch on his feet, then his wife, then another person. Then the entire ballroom exploded. 200 people surged to their feet. The applause was deafening. It echoed off the vaulted ceiling, off the marble floors, off the crystal chandeliers that trembled from the sound. "Bravo!" someone shouted. "Incredible! He's just 10 years old!" Dr. Finch pushed through the crowd. "Who's your teacher? Where did you train?" A woman in diamonds grabbed the administrator's arm. "Get me his contact information, now!" "I want to sponsor him," a man announced. "Full scholarship, anywhere he wants." Dr. Carter climbed the stage steps first, grabbed Elijah and pulled him into a hug. "Oh my God, Elijah!" Angela broke through the crowd, ran up the steps, wrapped her arms around her son. Elijah collapsed into her. His legs gave out. He was shaking from adrenaline and exhaustion. "I did it, Mama," he whispered. "I did it." "I know, baby. I know." The standing ovation continued. 1 minute, 2 minutes, 3. "Encore!" someone shouted. But Elijah couldn't. His hands shook, his fingers bled. He'd given everything. He looked out at the crowd, at 200 faces that had been laughing 15 minutes ago. They weren't laughing now. Then his eyes found Richard. The man stood alone. Not clapping, not moving. His champagne glass lay shattered at his feet. His face had gone completely white. The applause settled. The crowd waited for Richard Whitmore to fulfill his promise. Richard walked toward the stage slowly, like each step required conscious thought. He climbed the steps, stood facing Elijah and Angela. "Where did you learn to play like that?" His voice came out rough. Elijah wiped his eyes. "YouTube, sir, and my school music teacher let me borrow a violin." "YouTube." Richard repeated it like a foreign word. "You taught yourself?" "Yes, sir." Richard's hands trembled. "What's your full name?" "Elijah Carter." "And your mother?" Richard's eyes moved to Angela, really looked at her for the first time. "Your name is Angela Carter." Angela's face changed, recognition, then shock, then fear. "Yes," she whispered. The ballroom went silent. 200 people watching, not understanding but sensing importance. Richard stared at Angela. "From Boston College, 11 years ago." Angela's hand tightened on Elijah's shoulder. Richard looked at Elijah, at his face, his eyes, the shape of his jaw. Did the math he'd been avoiding? 11 years ago, one night. Angela tried to contact him, and he'd ignored her messages because he was too busy, too ambitious. The color drained from his face. "Oh, God." The words escaped. "Oh, my God." Dr. Carter stepped forward. "Richard, you made a deal. $20,000. Richard didn't hear her. "He's mine," Richard whispered. "He's my son." The ballroom erupted in gasps. Phones lifted, recording. Angela's eyes filled with tears. She nodded once. Elijah looked between them. "What's happening?" Richard sank to his knees, right there on stage, in his $3,000 suit, in front of 200 people. He knelt at eye level with the boy he'd humiliated, the boy who was his son. "I'm sorry." His voice cracked. "I'm so sorry." Elijah stared. "I don't understand." "I'm your father." Richard's hands shook. "And I didn't know. I should have known." The crowd watched in stunned silence. Richard looked up at Angela. "Why didn't you tell me?" "I tried." Angela's voice was steady despite her tears. "You were already gone, already becoming this." She gestured at his expensive suit. "You didn't want complications." "I was stupid. Richard couldn't finish. He looked at Elijah again, at this incredible child, his child, whom he'd called your kind, whom he'd mocked, humiliated, tried to break. The realization crushed him. "Excellence recognizes excellence," Elijah said quietly. "Isn't that what you said?" The crowd murmured. Someone laughed. Not cruel. Appreciation for the perfect callback. Richard's face crumpled. "Yes, that's what I said." "So." Elijah's voice didn't waver. "Did I play well enough?" Richard looked at this 10-year-old boy, his son, with tears streaming down his face. "You played better than anyone I've ever heard." Richard stood slowly, turned to face the crowd, 200 faces staring back at him. He'd built his empire in control, of certainty, on never showing weakness. But standing on that stage, next to the son he'd just discovered, Richard Whitmore let go of all of it. "I made a promise," he said. His voice carried across the silent ballroom. $20,000 if the boy could play. He paused. He didn't just play. He gave us something I haven't heard in 20 years. Something I forgot existed. Richard's throat tightened. Genuine excellence. Not manufactured, not trained, just pure. He pulled out his phone, opened his banking app right there on stage. I'm donating $50,000 to the hospital fund, in Elijah Carter's name. Murmurs of approval rippled through the crowd. And I'm establishing a scholarship fund, $500,000 over 5 years for young musicians from underprivileged backgrounds. The Elijah Carter Music Scholarship. Applause began again, but Richard raised his hand. I'm not finished. He looked at Angela. I owe you 11 years of child support. My lawyers will calculate the amount. It'll be in your account by Monday. Angela's hand went to her mouth. And your medical debt. Richard's voice cracked. Stage 3 pancreatic cancer. Working through chemotherapy. That debt is cleared as of tonight. Your treatment, anything you need, covered. The crowd gasped. Angela started to cry, really cry. Dr. Carter put an arm around her shoulders. Richard knelt again, looked at Elijah. I can't undo what I said tonight. I can't take back how I treated you both. He swallowed hard. But I can do better. Starting now. Elijah stared at him. Are you really my dad? Yes. Where were you? The question hit Richard like a physical blow. I was building a company, making money, thinking that mattered more than anything else. He shook his head. I was wrong. Mama said my dad didn't want me. Angela made a sound like she'd been struck. Baby, I never... It's what I thought. Elijah looked at Richard. Is that true? Richard's face twisted. I didn't know about you. If I had... Would you have stayed? The question hung in the air. Richard wanted to say yes, wanted to lie, make it easier. But he'd lied enough. I don't know, he said quietly. The man I was 11 years ago? Probably not. I was selfish, ambitious. Elijah nodded slowly, processing. But the man I am right now? I would give everything I own for the chance to know you, to be your father, if you'll let me. I don't know you. I know. And you were really mean to Mama. I was. You made her cry. Richard looked at Angela, saw the tears streaming down her face. I did. And I'm sorry. Elijah thought about this. His 10-year-old brain working through complexities that shouldn't belong to children. Mama says everyone deserves a second chance. Richard's breath caught. But you have to earn it. Elijah stood straighter. You can't just buy it. You're right. So if you want to be my dad, you have to show up. Not just with money. With you. Richard nodded. Couldn't speak. Okay? Okay, Richard managed. I'll show up. I promise. Elijah held out his small hand. Richard stared at it, then took it. His large hand engulfing the child's. They shook, formal, tentative. A beginning. The crowd erupted again. This time the applause felt different, warmer, like they were witnessing redemption. Dr. Finch approached the stage. Elijah, I'm from Boston Conservatory's youth program. I'd like to offer you a full scholarship, private lessons with our best teachers. How much does it cost? Elijah asked. For you, nothing. Another man stepped forward, James Kilmartin from the Arts Foundation. And housing support. A proper apartment for you and your mother, near the conservatory. Angela shook her head. This is too much. No, it's not, Dr. Carter said firmly. You've been giving to this hospital for 10 years. Let someone give back. The hospital administrator climbed onto the stage. Angela, we'd like to offer you a position in patient services. Better pay, better hours. You'd work with families navigating treatment costs. but You're not just anything. The administrator smiled. You raised that. She pointed at Elijah. We need people like you. Angela looked at Elijah, at Richard, at the crowd suddenly seeing her as human. Say yes, Elijah whispered. Angela laughed through her tears. Yes, okay, yes. The ballroom exploded in cheers. Richard faced the crowd. Tonight was supposed to be about excellence recognizing excellence. I thought I knew what that meant. I thought it meant credentials and pedigree. He looked at Elijah. I was wrong. Excellence is this. A child who taught himself violin from YouTube because he loved music more than comfort. A mother who sacrificed everything so her son could dream. Richard's voice broke. That's excellence. And I almost missed it because I was too blind to see past my own prejudice. The crowd listened in silence. I can't undo tonight. Can't erase what I said. Richard swallowed hard. But I can choose differently tomorrow, and every day after that. He looked at Angela and Elijah. If you'll let me. Angela was quiet for a long moment. Then she nodded. Just once. But it was enough. 6 months later, spring arrived in Boston with cherry blossoms and warmer winds. Elijah stood backstage at Symphony Hall, his first public recital with the Boston Conservatory Youth Orchestra. He wore a suit now, not expensive but clean, fitted. His violin, not the Stradivarius, but a quality instrument provided by the conservatory, rested in his hands. Through the curtain he could see the audience filling the seats. Angela sat in the front row. Healthy now. Her hair had grown back after chemotherapy. The cancer was in remission. She wore a blue dress and smiled like someone who'd remembered how. Next to her sat Richard. He'd kept his promise. Showed up every week for lessons, for recitals, for dinner at their new apartment in Cambridge. Showed up even when it was awkward. Even when Elijah didn't want to talk. Even when Angela looked at him with justified anger. He showed up anyway. Some things couldn't be bought. Had to be earned. One day at a time, Mrs. Carter sat 2 rows back, dabbing her eyes with a tissue before the performance even started. Dr. Finch stood in the wings, giving last-minute encouragement to his students. The lights dimmed. Elijah walked onto the stage. The applause was warm, welcoming. No one here knew about the gala 6 months ago. No one knew about the champagne on the floor or the cruelty or the DNA test that confirmed what a violin had already proven. They just knew a talented kid was about to play. And he did. Beautifully. After the concert, after the standing ovation and the flowers and the congratulations, the 3 of them walked out into the spring evening. Richard carried Elijah's violin case. Angela held her son's hand. They looked almost like a family. Not perfect, not healed completely, but trying. You hungry? Richard asked. Pizza? Elijah suggested. Richard smiled. Pizza sounds perfect. They walked down Massachusetts Avenue together, past the university, past the bookstores, past the late-night cafes full of students, just 3 people. Moving forward, talent doesn't expire. It waits, sometimes for years, through night shifts and cracked hands and dreams deferred. But here's what people like Richard Whitmore need to understand. When you judge someone by their uniform instead of their worth, you're not just being cruel. You're being stupid, because excellence hides in unexpected places, in children who teach themselves violin from YouTube, in mothers who sacrifice everything, in hands that both scrub floors and make instruments sing. Elijah didn't need Richard's permission to be brilliant. He needed Richard's cruelty to remind him he already was. And sometimes the people who dismiss you need to see you shine more than you need their approval. Your circumstances don't define your capacity. Your talent doesn't need anyone's validation to be real. Every ending is someone else's beginning. So here's the question. Who have you underestimated today? Whose story did you judge by its cover? And more importantly, what dreams are you deferring that might only need one moment of courage to reignite? If this story moved you, don't scroll past. Hit subscribe. Every week, I bring you real stories of underdogs who refused to stay down. Drop a comment. Have you ever been underestimated? I read every single one. And if you know someone who needs to hear this, someone who's deferred their dreams, share this with them. Sometimes we all need a reminder that it's not too late.
At Black Voices Uncut, we don't polish away the pain or water down the message. We tell it like it is because the truth deserves nothing less. If today's story spoke to you, click like, join the conversation in the comments, and subscribe so you'll be here for the next Uncut Voice.